Hello, everyone, and welcome to the College and Career Readiness and Success Center's webinar, Establishing Key Partnerships for Successful Work-Based Learning, Strategies for States and Districts. My name is Ellen Cushing, and I'm the Deputy Director for the CCRS Center. Today's webinar is the second in a series of webinars focused on supporting state education agencies and local education agencies in designing, implementing, scaling, and continuously improving quality work-based learning opportunities for all students. Throughout the summer, we will host additional webinars on key work-based learning topics, including data-driven decision-making and supporting rural communities in implementing work-based learning. Before we get started, we wanted to share a little bit about the CCRS Center. We are a federally funded technical assistance center charged with supporting state and local education agencies in their college and career readiness efforts, including supporting the implementation of policies and initiatives focused on the education to workforce pipeline, including employability skills and post-secondary preparedness. And we do this work by supporting a range of technical assistance to our stakeholders. Throughout the webinar, there will be several opportunities to engage with the moderator and presenters. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can use the chat box located on the right-hand side of your screen. You can also use the raise hand function to speak on the line. And finally, we will be collecting feedback after the webinar where you can provide additional feedback on your experience. We will also be posting a recording of the webinar online after the event on the CCRS Center events page. Now I would like to turn it over to today's moderator and my CCRS Center colleague, Beth Ratway, who will introduce the panel.
Thank you, Ellen. My name is Beth Ratway. I am a technical assistance lead here for the CCRS Center, and I will be moderating today's panel. Today's panel includes two folks from Tennessee, Matthew Spinella and Richard Skipper. Matthew Spinella is the Director of Work-Based Learning and Industry Engagement at the Tennessee Department of Education, and Richard Skipper is the Assistant CTE Director and the Work-Based Learning Coordinator for Coffee County High School. We're going to go through and give some context about some background about participants, and we will give some background about the work. And then we will talk about what's going on in Tennessee, and then we're going to have a panel discussion with Matthew and Richard regarding how they're engaging partners in the work-based learning. Our agenda for today is to review who key partners are that can support high-quality work-based learning systems. We will also discuss the role of key partners in work-based learning efforts and share strategies for engaging key partners in work-based learning efforts. We wanted to give some background in the context fairly quickly, but we wanted to talk a little bit about why we're talking about work-based learning. And to tee it up, we looked at the projections for 2020 that there will be 55 million jobs. 65% of those jobs will require post-secondary training. But there's this gap where there will be 5 million unfulfilled positions. And when we're talking about this, when we talk about post-secondary training, we're not talking about a 4-year institute of education. We're talking about a variety of areas in terms of career technology centers, credentialing, associate's degree, college associates, undergraduate, advanced degrees. So this is very important to understand the context of why we're talking about work-based learning. These positions and this 5 million unfilled is a real concern in the field, and it's highlighting the need of how we need to adjust and help students prepare for either the types of post-secondary education that they'll need to fill these jobs and really understand the system. A quick look at employers' perceptions. There's a few things that employers are saying to support this. And one thing and one gap that they're finding in the field is that they are finding it's hard for employers to get employees that have what we're calling employability skills. And these are cross-cutting skills. They're sometimes called soft skills. They're sometimes called employability, work-based skills. But they really focus on critical thinking, collaboration, digital literacy, all the different aspects. Employers cite them as the most important group of skills that folks are lacking in the field and that they need support in building in their employees. students also, in terms of talking with students and getting some data from students, what they're saying is that they do have post-secondary plans in one way or another. But under half of them say or agree that their schools have helped match them with careers with their interests and abilities. And under half say that they agree that schools have helped them understand the steps that they need to take to have a career that they want. So they aren't getting as much support in terms of matching their skills to the types of careers, to discussing what types of careers would be best for them, to really understanding what those skills are that they need to fill some of the needs in the field. This led us to work with Octay to really have a discussion about what are the needs and what's the conversation out there in terms of balancing that between what employers need and what we're doing in a K-12 education system in alignment with post-secondary. And the first aspect of it is that we really focus, primarily the system focuses on academic skills and technical skills. And you have these separated into, you know, your academics, technical. There's some conversations about bringing the two together, showing alignment. But right now what we're finding in talking to employers, in talking to post-secondary, and in talking to schools, there's a third aspect that we don't pay much attention to, that there's a high need in order to fill those jobs with folks and with students in the field, is to really balance those three areas. So you need a focus on academic skills, you need a focus on career industry specialization, but you also really need to focus on employability skills. There needs to be a balance between those three and a system that seamlessly supports those three buckets in terms of helping prepare students to go out into into careers that support their work. And this is where we come up with the concept and the programs around work-based learning. Work-based learning supports student learning in those three areas. This is the definition that we're working with in terms of work-based learning: a sequence set of activities in which students gain increasing exposure to the world of work and are prepared with the knowledge and skills needed for productive careers. Really encompasses all three of those buckets, or giving students preparation in all three of those areas. And this is the continuum of work-based learning experiences, and you can see across the top kind of where it resides around the different grades, and that it needs to be systematic K-12, that they're getting opportunities in the system to look at different jobs, to understand about careers, to build those employability skills as well. And you can see the arrow on the bottom where it talks about increasing individualization in the system. So if you look at the awareness and exploration, that's really most of the time classroom-based, where they're learning about work and have different opportunities to learn about careers and what folks are doing, and really engaged at times employability in the classroom as well. Then you get up to the higher grades and the higher part of the continuum, and you're really getting them focusing on career preparation and career training, and getting them engaged in careers to see whether they like it or not, whether they want to engage in it, whether it really matches their skills. So they start learning through work and learning for work in this continuum. And if you look at this, you can see all the way across really hits the theme of this webinar. So if you look at awareness, exploration, preparation, and training, a K-12 system cannot do that by themselves. They need to be informed by the community, by the business leaders around their community and around their state, and they need to involve different partners to help with each of these stages of the continuum. The New Skills for Youth, which is run out of CCSSO, brings states together to talk about career technical education, sometimes work-based learning. And one of the ideas that came out is that they really are promoting engaging partners and engaging the right partners at the right time. And that a system for work-based learning cannot work at all if you do not have the right partners on board. And you need to engage them, and you need to continuously engage them, and have deliberately actually engage them in the work, and make it meaningful and have a value add for all the partners involved. And that's really what we want to focus on today, is how not only, you know, the purpose of a work-based learning system and how it fits into this bigger context that we just talked about, but really unpacking how do you choose the partners, who needs to be at the table, why do they need to be at the table, and how do you engage them in this work. So we have a polling question. our first polling question that we wanted to ask you is, in terms of your work and in terms of your engagement in work-based learning, we'd like you to rate your current level of engagement with partners in regards to work-based learning. Are you not working with partners at all? You're trying to do it on your own. It's a school, and you're just trying to engage with. You're trying to get your kids engaged in the lower end of the continuum, or to the level 4. We consistently engage you. They're engaged with you all the time. They're part of your visioning. They're part of your mission. You're talking to different partners all the time. So just gauge yourself on a 1 to 4 scale of where you think your organization is at in terms of working with partners. About 2 more seconds. Okay. And it looks like, if we look at the percentages, it looks like there's a lot of you, which is exciting because we'll learn from each other today in terms of the discussion, is that 50% of you really do it on a regular basis, are level 4s. So we're at 85% of the folks that are on the call are really engaging partners. And you understand the importance of engaging partners in this work. What we're going to do today then, based off of that, is we're going to learn from one example from Tennessee from an SEA and LEA level, and have a conversation with them and ask some questions. And then we'd like to learn from you as well. So we'll give you some time at the end to ask questions or share ideas in the chat box. But really think about maybe other ways to engage partners, and looking at one specific example in Tennessee to see how it can add value to your work, or maybe get different ideas, and then we can learn from each other today on this webinar. So we're going to start, as I said, we're going to start the webinar by understanding the context of Tennessee. Matthew's going to take us through helping us understand what work-based learning looks like and feels like in Tennessee. And then I'm going to ask Richard to talk a little bit about what it looks like on an LEA level. And then we're going to have a panel discussion really talking about the partners, the roles, lessons learned, so we can learn from each other in moving this work forward. So Matthew, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Thank you, Beth. 2013, then Work-Based Learning Executive Director Chelsea Parker redesigned the Work-Based Learning Framework. Her goal was to build off the existing cooperative education model by allowing students to apply their technical knowledge from their first, second, and third year CTE courses to related jobs and internships. Also to establish course standards that focused on mastery of employability skills, as you had mentioned before. To train work-based learning coordinators to effectively engage their industry partners. And lastly, to empower students to develop a worthwhile portfolio that highlights their individual accomplishments. If you go over to the next slide, I would like everybody to take a look at this and really think about when you look at Tennessee's revitalized work-based learning model, how effective do you think it is to try and cram industry awareness, career exploration, career prep, and career training into 4 years of high school? Beth touched upon this earlier, but the fact of the matter is Tennessee adopted a K to J model, which emphasizes a K-12 work-based learning continuum in which students are exposed to career education as early as kindergarten. Part of my vision for moving work-based learning forward in the future is to also take the approach in which you apply career readiness across the K-12 curriculum in the same way that many schools like to promote reading and writing across the curriculum. So if you look at a lot of the research, many studies have shown that reading and writing across the curriculum really improves and builds off of strong student achievement or contributes to it. And I am of the belief that if you take that approach and apply career readiness across the curriculum in that same way, you'll see enhanced student achievement, you'll see an increase in student engagement with their content, and a better desire to kind of proceed and move forward. I really think this is going to help with students as they work toward immersion into their pathway of choice. If you want to move to slide 20 now. Within our work-based learning policy guide, you'll see the following graphic that demonstrates the supports that we provide our students on their work-based learning journey. At the building level, we have teachers, counselors, and administrators, all who play a vital role for students. But outside the building, we have employers, intermediaries, and other stakeholders that help make decisions about what works best for each local entity and provides the best outcomes for the students. Finally, the regional alignment layer attempts to create a seamless transition for students as they matriculate from high school to post-secondary to a high-skill and high-wage career. If you look at that Pathways Tennessee approach to regional alignment, that's something that's been adopted across many states. And the only way that that works is really to identify the stakeholders outside of the building that are, number one, prepared, number two, willing, and number three, equipped to actually interact with the students, provide that layer of mentorship and increased assistance for the students while they're on their work-based learning experience. It's not just about providing a student with a job or offering the student an opportunity to learn about a career. It's actually about supporting that student so he or she can learn about work at work and have someone to bounce ideas off of, express some fears, trepidations, and other things that, you know, a regular workplace supervisor might not have the time to accommodate. So having that mentorship, having that additional training, and having that opportunity to kind of bounce ideas with a thought partner is really what gets the students that true immersion into the work.
Thank you. And then, Richard, if you just want to give kind of a high level of the background between your relationship and kind of where you're coming from when we start the panel discussion.
Sure. So I'm actually the director for career technical education for our county, and my background is for 11 years before I got into education, I was industry. So I kind of learned how, I know the language, and you kind of know the risk and the rewards, and so through relationships with my industry board, through our Chamber of Commerce, we made connections with different groups, but particularly one looking for opportunities in the manufacturing field for our students. It's in the state of Tennessee. This is our third year doing this in the state of Tennessee. It was it hasn't been done very much at all, and it's out of fear. But we found a group that was, when we present, we talk about, I found somebody willing to jump off the cliff with me. And so our kids have benefited tremendously from this. And through the endeavor, it's spread to the other groups in our company. And what we find out is, as much as a lot of them want to participate, they're fighting corporate policy. So it's been worked from numerous ends now. And for my system in particularly, I'm at a point where I don't have enough kids for all the opportunities that we have, really. So that's a good thing, but it's pushed opportunities to talk to a lot of the school systems. But ultimately it's about finding that right fit, because at the end of the day, it's what's best for the students and what are they going to get out of it. But it is a tremendous investment by any company, especially in manufacturing, that's going to do this. And when I say investment, it's investment in specifics. It's investment in a supervisor, like what you said, Beth, or Matt, I'm sorry, where you said, it's not just about go to work and clock in 7 hours and then leave. It's about all the intangible things that, you're going to get in trouble if you're late another time, or, you have to, when the bell rings, you have to go back to the floor, or, there's a reason we do this, and there's a reason, So anyway, that's where we're at in the manufacturing field with VIAM manufacturing. And, I can't say it enough. The bottom line is about relationships. So.
Good, and that's exactly what, thank you for teeing that up. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about on this panel. So we have a set of questions for Matthew and Richard, focusing on key partners, roles, engagement, and lessons learned. And I see there are some questions that are coming in the chat box and in the question box, and I'm holding on to them, and we will ask them at the end, but I am looking at them, and Jessica is looking at them as well. And so we will help to address those questions as we go through. But we're really focused right now on really how to engage key partners, what their roles are, and how to build those relationships, and some lessons learned from the Tennessee work. So to begin with, we know that work-based learning requires a coordination really across businesses, industries, student service, transportation. There's a lot of things that you're juggling in a work-based learning system. And I was hoping that both of you could share who are the key partners that have been instrumental in supporting that work. Matthew, which key partners have been most instrumental in establishing your statewide system of support for work-based learning?
I'm just going to preface this by saying that I pre-scripted these answers to prevent myself from kind of deviating from the topic at hand, so bear with me as I read. For the Department of Education, state government, the State Board of Education, our Career Cluster Advisory Councils, and our Work-Based Learning Leadership Council have been extremely instrumental in building the infrastructure for our high school work-based learning program and K-12 work-based learning continuum. Governor Bill Haslam's Drive to 55 initiative, which emphasizes a goal of equipping more than 55% of Tennesseans with a college degree or certificate by 2025, emphasizes the importance of work experience in high-growth, high-skill occupations. The State Board of Education reviewed and approved work-based learning course standards and our framework, which allowed all schools to offer work-based learning as a third and/or fourth-year CTE course. Career Cluster Advisory Councils were highly influential partners in the development of our framework and also sharing positive information with willing industry partners. Finally, our Work-Based Learning Leadership Council did a tremendous job training coordinators statewide on the newly established framework, which emphasizes career knowledge, navigation, 21st century learning and innovation skills, personal and social skills, and the development of a comprehensive student portfolio.
Thank you. Thank you. Richard, how do you work with partners at the local level in terms of who do you engage with the most and who helps you facilitate those work-based learning opportunities?
Right. So initially, our Chamber of Commerce is a group that, you know, they kind of got their hands in everything as far as business and industry with our group. So because I'm Director of Education as far as current technical education, I'm also on the industrial board. We have what we call industrial roundtables, where once a month industries from our county meet, businesses and industries, and the chamber sets it up. We have what's called it's a CEO program where business and industries donate time, and it may be with our younger kids in our school system where they may donate time to read. They may donate sending folks in to talk about what it's like being an engineer or whatever it is. So that has just exploded, and it's exploded for a couple of reasons. One, it's exploded because folks know now, or they're realizing now, they've got to start building their workforce at a younger age, mainly because the unemployment rate is so low, the bodies aren't there. So if they want the cream of the crop, you know, they're trying to be more selective in, you know, getting their hands on kids earlier to check their interests. So there's less mistakes made, you know, try 10 different things, you know, find out which one you think you're going to be really interested in and you're going to be more successful with. But anyway, so our chamber is a big partner with us. We have an educational roundtable, and we're fortunate that it's just from probably 4 years ago when we kind of started with a small group in our chamber, it's just spread. And it's spread because, you know, we're at a point where business and industries, they're trying to reach in now instead of where we were just always reaching out. You know, we've got a successful model that's taken place for 3 years now. And so we're, you know, they're reaching out to us trying to figure out, okay, how do I get a piece of that pie now? So that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you. So now focusing on, we talked about kind of who the key partners are in terms of chambers of commerce and the multiple layers at the SEA level, Matthew, that you talked about. But then that leads us to a discussion in order for these partnerships to be effective, and you have different partners and multiple stakeholders that are involved in all the layers of work-based learning. How do you really clearly define the roles? Let's start with Matthew. Matthew, how do you define and communicate what the partner's role is in supporting your work-based learning?
Well, at the beginning, it really is a matter of the stakeholders defining their roles as they see fit. In the beginning, you really give them the opportunity. In the same way that Richard said, any in is an in, any way in which our stakeholders can contribute and help us, we all have a common vision. We all understand that we want what's best for our students, but from industry's perspective, how can they extend their talent pipeline as deep as possible and provide meaningful outcomes for the students that also benefit them in their work? But when you think about this, we actively define and communicate each partner's role once our working relationship is established by providing updates at career cluster advisory council meetings. We have ongoing training and communication with our work-based learning leadership council. And we also utilize mailing lists and college and career readiness newsletter updates. Our work-based learning website also contains a robust toolbox that includes informational materials for industry partners, work-based learning coordinators, and students. So if you take a look at this graphic that's on the screen here, you can see that employers, community members, teachers, parents, and school districts all play a vital role. And from the perspective of the state, we like early on for everyone to establish a consistent and clear vision and to participate in whatever capacity they see fit, but then eventually kind of filling in those established roles and kind of carrying forward with that vision in mind.
Then Richard, how do you do that at the local level? How do you really clearly define your role, first of all, as a work-based learning coordinator, but then also anybody else, all the other partners that are engaged that you're working with your students in this work-based learning system?
Right. So from an LEA standpoint, I would be remiss if I didn't say that we are successful because our director of schools, from the highest level, believes in career and technical education. And when I say, we have a saying, it's kind of, I started it, but it kind of spread. But the one thing that we do know is that our students are going to be something one day. Don't know what. So as long as our goal is to figure out how to give them that little seed to be successful at whatever they're going to decide to do. And if that means giving them, 6 months of school while they're in school, 3 hours a day with extra hands-on activities or whatever, it's making the relationship for them. It's, it's been called a lot of things over the years, getting your foot in the door, whatever it is. I mean, that's what we're trying to do to help our students do that, because ultimately we know our students are going to be running our community one day. I mean, so, that's really our job, is to prepare them, hopefully, to do it in a successful manner. But as far as we have, at Coffee County, I have 3 other work-based learning coordinators. The VIAM manufacturing is kind of my baby. And the reason it is because it's one of those deals with manufacturing where it's successful because there are 2 people, myself and Keith Hayes, that we can make decisions quickly. And with us trying to blueprint it, and we didn't have. It cuts down on your success if you've got to run a lot of things up a ladder before you can make a decision about whether a kid's supposed to work past 9 o'clock or whatever it is. So, but we have criminal justice work-based learning, which it's internships. And so our kids rotate 9-week sections. There's no pay involved in that, but it's about the experiences. We have, the CNA, where I think they're at a nursing home till 10 o'clock. Monday through Thursday, and they don't start school until 3rd period because they're at the nursing home 1st and 2nd period. And so that gets them their CNA. They test for that type of work-based learning. And And then we have our standard, which probably was, you know, old school co-op, but now it's an alignment to their program of study where, you know, I have multiple kids that are like in marketing that may be working at the local service center or drugstore or whatever it is. But I think everybody kind of understands the role. Has to be from the head down. You know, I'm fortunate that our director of schools and our principals believe in career and technical education. They believe in extended training, you know, post-secondary training, but it may come, post-secondary training doesn't mean it's an institution you're going to. It could be getting extended knowledge in the next level of whatever it is. So it's a belief. It starts at the top. And then fortunately, you know, our system lets me run. So that's kind of what makes it successful for us.
So you talk about engaging, you're in all these different programs. How complicated does it get to work with each of those partners?
So to be successful in the different areas, that's why I said I have 3 other work-based learning coordinators, because you have to be able to say, okay, this is your piece of the pie, this is your piece of the pie, and keep me informed of you know, I'm the big umbrella, so keep me informed of all that's going on, and I'm the one that's going to, you know, all the roundtable meetings and to the, you know, when we have new companies that are coming in, our industrial board invites me so that we can talk about the programs that we have and how we could possibly get kids in there doing different types of work and stuff. So it has to be a group effort because there is so many different fingers and types of work-based learning. You know, service learning is part of it. I mean, there's so many things, and it's all about experiences for your kids. I say all the time, you know, we work closely with our trade centers, whatever they call Tennessee Current Technical Training Centers is what we call them. I'm not sure what they're called in different states, but TCAT. But whenever we do dual enrollments and stuff like that, you know, I tell them, listen, at the high school level, we're gonna take them as deep as we can take them. But when they come to you, you know, you're taking them deeper. So, you know, we want them to know a lot about a little about a lot of things, so that when they get to you, you can finite it and they can know a lot about whatever specific little things it is. So it's the same way. We want our kids to touch and be engaged in many things as we can. But the number one rule is they have to stay on track. They have to stay on track and be on track to graduate, because we can't give them those extra hands-on opportunities if there's any risk in academic classes or whatever. So that's where my teachers come in, is that they're constantly tracking, making sure, hey, you know, you're dragging Q3 in English, you know, we're fixing to have to pull you. You're going to have to sit in class with me until you get your grades up. So it is a balance, but that's really where we're at in education. And good, bad, or indifferent is that we have to keep tracking and keep tracking and keep tracking, you know, because we have learned some lessons. We've learned lessons where, you know, a kid got used to making money and they started filling all their classes, and, you know, they're moved out and they think they're going to be independent, and we're having to back up and say, whoa, wait a minute now. Number one rule is you got to graduate. You got to be successful and graduate first. So that's part of the lessons, and part of it takes a lot of us. It's that whole adage, you know, takes a city or a village. It's true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So then kind of moving on to our next topic that builds off of what you were saying, I'm going to start with you and then go to Matthew. But how do you make sure that it's well structured? How do you make sure that your engagement with these partners is well structured, and how do you get them to commit?
Well, so for us, or for me, the most successful thing is there's 3 or 4 things that are required in order to do work-based learning, as far as following state standards, as far as you know, the employer has to do basically a grade sheet quarterly. There's just different things that they have to do. And what I've found that's the most successful is when you go and sit down with those groups. Prime example, when I went to VIAM and I said, hey, so can I get you once a quarter to grade our kids? And I had the form that the state had. It had 6 questions on there, and they had to rate it 1 through 5, and it gives you a breakdown of the grades. And VIAM says, sure, we can do that, but we do this for all of our employees every quarter, and it's a 5-page one that they do. So they're like, well, is this good enough, or do we need to still do yours? And I'm like, no, I think you got it covered, you know. So what I found is those companies that already do those things for their employees, you know, they track their safety, they track their all of the trainings that they've had and put it in their file, all the things that we're required to gather and put into the personalized learning plan for the students. They're already doing. That's the companies that you're really looking to get on board with you, because you're not asking them to do anything more than what they're already doing.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, then from the state level, how are you working with this? What institutional structures, agreements, and resources need to be in place to make it work from an SEA perspective?
Well, Tennessee is fortunate to have bipartisan support from state government with the Drive to 55. And again, just to reiterate, it's basically Tennessee's initiative to equip at least 55% of its residents with some sort of industry certification, post-secondary degree of some sort. We also have tremendous support of our framework from our State Board of Education, local and state chambers of commerce, and LEA partners. And the reason for that is because, again, we've had really ongoing two-way communication between each stakeholder. We've gained input from them on what they think is in need of change and what they think is working well. And essentially the work-based learning framework has become a living document because it's constantly changing to kind of, you know, work toward what's happening in the moment. Our work-based learning policy guide, implementation guide, personalized learning packet, and other resources in our work-based learning toolbox contain consistent messages about what makes quality work-based learning. This message is communicated regularly at our work-based learning trainings and recertification workshops that we house on our website. And then for the most part, when you are reaching out to your external stakeholders, even though we come from the state, I mean, you have to understand that you are not infallible. At no point are you without fault. So you kind of have to be willing to be flexible to make the adjustments that your different stakeholders need. And that's the way to, I guess, fortify the relationships that you have, because you're not just standing up on high and then just, you know, telling people what to do. There's never a shouting match. It's really just an open dialogue among all stakeholders to make sure that, you know, everybody understands what quality work-based learning looks like. And if what we thought was quality work-based learning today is no longer the case, please share that with us so we can make the adjustments necessary. It's like a halftime adjustment in the middle of a football game, kind of.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you. One tool that I wanted to highlight for all of you is that on our website, which I'll show you at the end, the ccrscenter.org, there we have some resources about work-based learning. And one of them that's key to this part of the conversation are work-based learning definitions. And that can help you set a common ground about vocabulary, about conversations, and give you some common verbiage to work from in terms of communication and setting that mission, vision, and having conversations with different partners. So it's just a tool that I wanted you all to be aware of on our website that I'll share at the end as well. And then the last piece that for the panel, before we get to audience questions, is to really think about what are the lessons learned. So what are the key lessons learned from this work? What advice would you give other SEAs, LEAs, or businesses that are engaged in work-based learning? So Matthew, if you'd like to start talking about some things that you thought about that you would want to share about lessons learned, that would be great.
Yeah, well, from my perspective, I got kind of a long list. So I put together 10 things, and again, I'm just going to read this directly from my script here. Number one, keep the best interest of the student in mind at all times. I mean, the reason why I got into education was because when I was in industry, part-time, I worked as a baseball coach for a local baseball club, and I really enjoyed seeing the development of my players. A lot of them are seniors in college now, and some of them have even graduated and gone on to careers. And I got into education to be able to extend my influence to a larger scope. And I always think about the students, always think about what's best for them, because again, as Richard pointed out, they're going to be the ones who are leading our future. You have to identify and involve key stakeholders for all decisions. Again, you cannot make a decision unilaterally. It's always best to gain agreement. And so if you take that time to get as many people who have the time to do it but are willing to, you gain a lot of perspective, and a lot of your initial gut instincts are right, but some of them might be misguided. And so gaining that perspective from all stakeholders is very helpful. Establish a common vision and set of goals. That's something that is probably first and foremost before you do anything. When you have the best interest of the student in mind, establish that common vision and goals. Attempt to compose the best possible plan for implementation. But as you know, not all plans are always perfect. So with that said, you should never be afraid to try new things. If you have a blueprint in place and you think that something different can kind of maybe expedite the accomplishment of a goal, or might be to open new doors, don't be afraid to try it, but understand that not all ideas and plans will work perfectly. So when you deviate, be willing to continuously improve and make adjustments as needed. Act on ideas and be willing to adjust or scrap them. Take ownership of your responsibilities by all means. If you say that you're going to do something and commit to it, please do so. Seek opportunities to continuously improve. And lastly, maintain ongoing communications so that everyone is on the same page.
Great. Thank you, Richard. What would you say from your perspective?
Well, I think Matthew hit a lot of them, most all of them. But again, I'm going to re-say, basically what Matt, sometimes there are just common sense decisions that need to be made about your students. Sometimes what the paper shows as being the ideal fit for a kid, when you get into conversations with the students and you really find out what they're wanting to do, maybe it didn't really match what their program is, specifically program of study is in school. It's our job to figure out how we can get them involved in, what they really want to do. So I guess what I'm saying is don't be afraid to make outside of the box decisions for kids if it's going to benefit them. And what I've run into is that there's been one fit for one kid. There's such a variety. Kids have so many choices now that they still think they know exactly what they're going to do. But as I keep telling them, I promise you your plans are going to change. So take advantage of what we can line up now. And another thing is when you set those relationships, when you develop those relationships and you get in those programs with doing work-based learning, you need to have the contact people need to be people that can make decisions quickly, because there's so much change. I know I've said that a couple of times, but when the bell schedule changes and kids can't leave till 2 and they're supposed to leave at 1, you got to have that person you can make contact with and say, hey, this is what's going on, because, hey, we have attendance incentives built into at Vian. So if they don't clock in on time, then that they lose $1 an hour bonus for 60 days that they previously worked. So it's knowing, hey, I'm going to call your supervisor, Delisa. She's going to reset it for you. The time clock's good. The school's on our side. Having a kid, hey, I got a kid that's struggling in geometry. He needs to stay an extra period to work to go into another geometry class and work. Don't count it against them. I need them to do this. So you got to have those two people that can communicate that information so that, again, students aren't punished for what they need to do to be successful. So that's really my two things that I think is paramount in being successful.
Okay. This leads to a whole bunch of other questions that I have for the two of you, but I want to leave it open to the audience in terms of asking questions. So now, please, if you want to put in the chat box some questions that you would have for the presenters. I do have one earlier on in the presentation, and it asks, who provides the funding streams for the building level work-based learning programs? How are they funded and how are they staffed?
Okay, I can say that on here. So it's part of our career technical education. Our work-based learning teachers are career technical education teachers. So they're teachers. So my teachers, just like if they had 14 kids in their level 3 class in criminal justice, well, instead of being in class, that teacher covering them in class, that teacher's covering them for the work-based learning experience. So it's still, because they're getting credits. I mean, our teachers are still teaching those kids, are responsible for those kids during the work-based learning experience. So it's our teachers. There's no difference. It's just another class, really, I guess is how I could say.
I see another question. How did Richard and Matthew encourage schools to engage in work-based learning opportunities with high school students? I'm trying to see. We are experiencing issues where partners would rather have college level students than high school students because they're thinking of the bottom line of filling their positions. So I know we've talked about this personally, but what advice would you give them in terms of working with partners and understanding the value add of high school students and getting engaged?
Well, from our perspective, and within our state, we have career cluster advisory councils, and a lot of those members from industry, they actually come up with some of our CTSO competitions or deviations for the competition, and then they help judge the events. And by just having a simple ask and giving them the opportunity to see what our students are capable of is really the first step in letting the light bulb kind of go off in their mind, as to say, these students might be better served or better equipped to perform my job than maybe some of the college students, because then I'll be able to get an opportunity to get that best job candidate as early as possible. When you think about recruitment costs, onboarding, and retention costs for employers, when you're providing them with students who are safe and prepared and capable of producing quality outputs, that's attractive to a lot of the businesses. So getting their foot in the door and exposing them to the work that our students are capable of, showing them what our students can do, and then demonstrating the value to them of extending their pipeline is something that at least gets something started. And then when you get one or two early adopters, sometimes it becomes infectious. Like, it's your best bet to have a few very vocal, willing partners who can speak to the promising practices and also share with you what can be fixed to kind of like help spread the word. Of course, that could work in the other direction too. If they get a bad taste in their mouth, it certainly could go in the other direction. But for the most part, when you're vetting the students and providing these employers with your best, they're going to sing your praises, and more people are going to pick up on it. It's kind of infectious, and I'm sure Richard can probably speak to that too.
Yeah, I think there's kind of I guess there's a blend of an answer that I have, is there should be room for both. There should be room for those college and those the post-secondary students, because they're going to be building that company, or they're going to be advancing that company later on. But I guess what I'm saying is that from the difference between the high school level and the trade school or college level is that you're looking for your high school kids. You're really looking for those companies that are looking to build the community, and not just worrying about their bottom line later on. It's those companies that understand, if I take care of my community, my community's going to take care of me. And it's about knowing those companies that know the radius of my potential employers are in high school right now. They go to this high school because they live in this area. So that's the kids that, there's not a whole lot. There are plenty, I'm sure, but there's a lot of companies that don't have a community college or a college or a trade center in close proximity to them. So that's why I say I think that's the attack from the high school level. But ultimately, I really believe this. Ultimately, the numbers. We're in a time now where the numbers dictate. They need to get all they can get because the numbers just aren't there. They got to figure out where they're going to get them from. I mean, that's just, it's a good and a bad thing, you know.
Sorry, I was on mute. So I said a lot of pithy things, but no, but thank you. I think we have two more questions, and I think it's really interesting because Matthew, when we had this discussion and you sent me some ideas, I think one partner, we haven't discussed one partner as a partner, and I think that's the student. And so we have two questions about what is the process you use to prep students for their experience? And then the other piece of another question of that is, how does the portfolio fit into and align to the work-based learning experience? But I think we can think strategically about the student as a partner in this as well. How do you prepare them, and how do you see the results in something like a portfolio?
Well, I think student preparation starts with strong classroom, fundamentals. Before my students go out, and you can see a sample calendar of work-based learning artifacts on our work-based learning toolbox. But often, my students start the school year, and I was last in the classroom in 2016 and 17, and I was the work-based learning coordinator for a few years. And my students were given, specific classroom time in which we did role play of the dispositional characteristics that you need when you go out into the workplace. Some of my students worked in fast food. Some of my students worked in an office setting. Others worked in, a healthcare facility in a non-clinical experience, but they were on rotations in which they learned all elements of operating a healthcare facility. So for each specific placement that the students found, we did in-class training. Okay, so the model is your students are going to be with you for a good hour and a half to 2 hours a day for the first, 3 to 5 weeks of the school year while they're securing their placement, learning how to present themselves properly, and taking care of all of those portfolio prep activities, such as my students created a Weebly website for themselves where they produced a blog, they created a YouTube channel. They also did some writing samples on Blogger. And so that classroom time that we had for an hour and a half to 2 hours, 5 days a week for those first 5 weeks, was that training that I provided. That was the prep time that I gave my students. And then once a week, my students came and saw me for at least an hour, and we were able to kind of work on things that were going on. So that was how I prepared my students for it. And the portfolio itself aligns with the standards that are set forth in the work-based learning course standards. Every week, my students would focus on something like career knowledge, innovation, teamwork, creativity, all of those different 21st century skills, even global competency, understanding of different cultures and such. Every standard that we had was something that we looked at on a week-to-week basis, and there was a project that students were responsible for producing at the end of that week. I would review those projects, and then with my blessing, I would say, you can publish this blog, you can publish this YouTube video, you can go ahead and add this to your website so that others, the outward-facing website can be visible for everyone. So there was training and there was guidance from a classroom perspective for our students that I provided and that all of our work-based learning coordinators provide.
Richard, do you have anything to add?
I can only speak for how we approach our students. Because we have grown, we've kind of changed some things. So when we talk about work-based learning experiences during the school year, we have that, but we've also kind of grown. We've got some companies that we still fight. The majority of the companies still say we need 18-year-olds, and I generally don't have conversations with them. I cut those conversations pretty quickly because I have companies that want all my kids. So what I've learned to do is that now we push that to our seniors. So when we have like senior week at the end of the school year this year, so it's the week we take, and it's after test, and We have our senior meetings and we talk to them about what they do at graduation. Well, I bring in employers that are looking to start some internships or whatever. So that I've just kind of, through relationships, it is still work-based learning, but it's after they graduate. So I brought 4 companies in at the end of the school year this year. They presented to the kids what's available. If you do this, this, and this, then we will pay for you to go to school for this. Or we have 32 positions. We're doubling our size. These are the jobs available. This is the pay scale. These are the people you contact. So I give them a chance one on 500 to present to all of my seniors. But then also I have, during registration time, I meet with all juniors, because we only do this with our seniors as far as work-based learning, because we want to make sure they're on track to graduate. And junior year is so heavy, there's really, for us, on a traditional setting, there's not a whole lot of room for work-based learning during their junior year. So anyway, but I have a class meeting with all juniors, and I present all of the positions and that I have, and then they have it's a process. They have to fill out an application. They have to show that it matches their program of study, what their interest is, and then I actually hand check all of those before I hand it to their counselors to say, all right, check their grades, make sure they're eligible academically. If they are, we'll roll with them. Like VIAM, every summer we start our VIAM kids in July 1. So this July, I think I've got 11 starting this July. And then what happens, that's the 11 or 12 that want to go ahead and get started. And then once school starts, we'll get 6 to 12 more that just didn't want to give up their summer, that will add on. So we'll add on into semester 1. We'll have, I'll have a football player or 2 that will add on semester 2 after football season, so that they can do it, during semester 2. So it's like what Matthew said. It's an evolving. You got to be flexible to change, but you also have to have that business partner that's in it for the right reason and is willing to take on. Hey, because we had, I think this year we had every student that completes our VIAM program successfully is offered a full-time job, and so I think we had 22 total for this year. It was 27 the first year, 22 this year, and 4 took the full-time. There was actually 8 that stayed on until they were leaving for school. And so it's just a build. It's just that's the way it works.
Right. I mean, and I think it's key. It goes back to exactly what you said earlier and what you're both talking about. And it's about those relationships, whether they be individual, whether it be with a company, but it has to build those relationships between you and, the 2 of you, in fact. So I think what I want to do is really say thank you to both of you for sharing all of this. And I can see, the excitement. I can hear it. I can see how well the programs are working for kids and how well you're working together. And I hopefully gave everybody, some nuggets to work from to build their own work-based learning programs off of that. I did put the CCRS Center website up. We do have a state work-based learning initiative. We do have resources on there. We have one that talks about the vocabulary that I shared with you earlier. We have one that talks about ESSA, Perkins, and WIOA, and what are the intersections? How is work-based learning supported in that, as well as partner engagement is really supported in all 3 of those policies. And then there are 2 other resources that I put on here, one from Jobs for the Future, and then one from ACT or the CTE in terms of the Career Readiness Stakeholder Engagement tool from New Skills for Youth. So there's some tools on here. When you get the recording and the PowerPoint, it'll have some of those resources, as well as the recording will have, you can go back and listen to some of the really great ideas that Matthew and Richard shared with us today. So I'd like to thank everybody. My contact information is there. You will be getting an evaluation, a quick evaluation after the webinar to give us some feedback on how we can make these better, or even talk to us about other topics that you would like covered in terms of this work. We appreciate everybody's time today, and specifically Matthew and Richard, thank you very, very much for spending this hour with us, really sharing the good work that you're doing in Tennessee.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.